This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chinese President Xi Jinping arrives in Indian city of Chennai for a second meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The journey to peace with Eritrea, how the Ethiopian Prime Minister won the Nobel Peace Prize. And Russian President Vladimir Putin warns of consequences from Turkey's ongoing military operation in northern Syria. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and for your business news, here is Uche.
Thank you, Hannah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Former President Jacob Zuma to stand trial on corruption charges. And Nigeria seeks to recover $62 billion from oil companies operating in the country. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it's back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Uche. We'll see you a little bit later. But in the meantime, Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived in the southern Indian city of Chennai on Friday for a second informal meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. CGTN's Chao Bing has more.
She arrived at Chennai International Airport at around 2 in the afternoon. The president received a warm welcome led by the governor and chief minister of the southern India state of Tamil Nadu. The Chinese president departed immediately for Mamallapuram, a historic town in Tamil Nadu. She and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi went on a guided tour of the temples built in the 7th and 8th centuries. At the last stop of Shore Temple, the two leaders enjoyed cultural performances. Indian media report that Xi and Modi will hold their informal conversations on Saturday. The first meeting of this kind took place in China's central city of Wuhan in April last year. After his trip to India, Xi will travel to Nepal for a state visit. Cao Bing, CGTN.
Ethiopians have reacted with overwhelming excitement at the news that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been awarded the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize by the Norwegian Nobel Committee. The Prime Minister says he is thrilled he was recognized for his efforts to achieve peace and international cooperation, and in particular for resolving the border conflict with neighboring Eritrea. Well, who is Abiy Ahmed's win? It's based on these peace initiatives in Eritrea. Let's take a look from Laura Wayubengo.
A town in the Gash Barka region of Eritrea. That was at the center of a bitter conflict between Ethiopia and Eritrea. This is the place in the larger Tigrinya region where prominent Ethiopian politicians hail from. They include former Prime Minister Meles Zenawi. The conflict between the two neighbors lasted between May 1998 and June 2000. It left over 70,000 soldiers and civilians dead. Some historians have put the number at 100,000, with civilian deaths accounting for 30% of the total deaths. The Algiers peace agreement signed between the two parties saw Badme placed under Eritrean administration. Ethiopia did not cede ground, and the two nations had been technically at war until Abiy Ahmed Ali became Ethiopia's prime minister in April 2018. From the ashes of the deadly war, which was the second largest military conflict since the 1977 to 1978 Ogaden War, Ethiopia is emerging as the latest regional mediator. A position that rides on the back of its gallant son, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who now basks in the glory of a Nobel Peace Prize.
When there is peace between the Ethiopian and Eritrean people, the Horn of Africa will become a region of peace and development. Our people who live scattered as refugees in humiliation will come back with dignity. Our citizens will not be sold and exchanged like commodities.
The situation between the two countries ran into a deadlock, so it needed that courage somehow to change the situation, and that's really what happened. And credit goes to the Prime Minister for doing that.
The easing of tensions between these two nations had placed Abiy at the apex of peace efforts. Ethiopia and Eritrea now enjoy diplomatic ties that have opened up trade between them. They have also eased cross-border movement of the people of the two countries, citizens who share an identity and culture. The Ethiopian premier had also promised to fully implement the 2000 Algiers peace deal. An Oromo born during the Red Terror regime, the 43-year-old former soldier and activist has seen Ethiopia open up to the world and had political prisoners freed. He has also empowered women, an achievement evidenced by the current president of Ethiopia, who is a woman. The Prime Minister has also sought to ease tensions between his nation and Somalia. Abiy Ahmed also played a leading role in diffusing an explosive situation in Sudan that followed the ouster of former President Omar al-Bashir. But his groundbreaking policies and initiatives have not come without a price. With the opening democratic space, Ethiopia has witnessed tension within its borders, as some ethnic communities call for more representation through creation of their own states. As a result of this, there's been an attempt on Abiy Ahmed's life, clashes between protesters and security forces, and a coup attempt in Amhara state. But in this win, Ethiopia now joins a list of few African countries that have produced Nobel laureates. Based on his charisma and diplomatic charm, the Nobel Peace Prize now gives Abiy Ahmed a reason to be one of the few leading peace negotiators in the region and in Africa. For Badme and the people of Eritrea, it is a moment to share in the magnificence of the Nobel Peace Prize of Ethiopia. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, Ethiopians have reacted with overwhelming excitement at the news that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been awarded the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize. Here's Daniela Pearson with more.
Back home in Ethiopia, they call him Dr. Abiy. He's Africa's youngest leader, but he's pushed through economic reforms such as liberalizing the banking and communication sectors. In the political arena, he's lifted bans on political parties and released imprisoned activists. And now, for his work as a peacemaker, he has received one of the world's highest accolades.
For all Ethiopians, we want to say how pleased we all are on behalf of the Prime Minister. Until now, the efforts we have made over the past 1.5 years to bring peace in the world, to bring about a truce, to bring about hope, to bring about unity. This is the concept of coming together. We are happy that these fruitful efforts towards working together have gained recognition and nominations for the prize. The role he has played in bringing peace in the region, the world has recognized with this reward. So therefore, this recognition is for all of us to be proud of, and it highlights our unity.
More recently, the 43-year-old Abiy has also been helping to mend relations across the region. He took on the role of mediator for Sudan and South Sudan, both of which were battling civil conflict. He also had a hand in resolving regional frictions, such as the maritime dispute between Kenya and Somalia.
He has done so much in East Africa, especially in the Middle East. He has managed to get imprisoned Ethiopians released, and he has enabled the Patriarch of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church to come back home.
Because he is making peace with our brothers in Eritrea, and he has undertaken various reforms in the country. So Ethiopia was known with war and the droughts, but at this time, all eyes are on Ethiopia because we are won the Nobel Peace Prize. So I am proud to be an Ethiopian.
It's great that he is such a positive thinker. He is steering us. I'm sure he will win other prizes, not only this one.
According to the Nobel Committee, the Peace Prize recognizes all the stakeholders working for peace and reconciliation in Ethiopia and in the East and Northeast African regions. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
We move to the Democratic Republic of the Congo now, where a cargo plane carrying presidential staff crashed on Thursday in the eastern part of the country. A presidential advisor has stated that all passengers and crew on board are feared dead. The aircraft was carrying President Felix Tshisekedi's driver, a logistics manager, and some soldiers. Russian diplomats told Congolese state media that Russian nationals are believed to be among the crew members. According to Civil Aviation Authority, it was headed to the capital Kinshasa from Goma and went off radar in the morning an hour after takeoff. Debris from the plane has been found, but the passengers on board are still missing. The cause of the accident is still unknown. We'll move on to Libya now, where the UN envoy there has expressed concern over what he calls the blatant violation of an arms embargo in Libya. According to him, strict enforcement of the embargo will also limit the interference of external players involved in the fighting that began when Eastern-based forces led by Khalifa Haftar launched an offensive on the capital Tripoli 6 months ago.
In early April, and especially since the foreign interference in this war became even more blatant, either in terms of violations of the arms embargo, especially with the arms embargo, but also possibly with direct presence on the ground of mercenaries, the potential presence of the ground of trainers or manipulators of the drones, and a clear internationalization of the conflict, or regionalization at least of the conflict. We need the Sanctions Committee to be more active in sanctioning those who violate the arms embargo, and we need the countries where these weapons are produced or bought to commit publicly to stop any transfer of arms to Libya.
The second batch of migrants being held in detention centers in Libya arrived in Rwanda early on Friday morning. According to an official from Rwanda's Ministry of Emergency Management, the group is composed of 99 men, 24 women, and 59 minors. The UN Refugee Agency says 106 of them are Eritreans, 15 are from Somalia, 2 are Sudanese, and 1 is from Syria. The resettlement is part of an agreement between the Rwanda government, UNHCR, and the African Union, which will benefit 500 migrants being detained in Libya. According to the agreement, the migrants are allowed to seek permanent residence in Rwanda and seek asylum in another country. Some will also receive help to return to their countries of origin. We'll move on to Benin now, where the president there, Patrice Talon, has launched a political dialogue to calm tensions sparked by the opposition's exclusion from April's elections. But on Thursday, his key foes did not attend talks as they remain in exile following a crackdown. The president invited 9 political parties to the discussion, which is set to last until Saturday. But key opposition groups have dismissed it as window dressing to mask the former business magnate's increasingly authoritarian rule. Benin has faced a political crisis since the parliamentary vote earlier this year that saw Talon's allies win all the seats as opposition groups were effectively banned.
Le dialogue politique auquel je vous convie.
The political dialogue to which I invite you is justified by the will of our people to see their political actors rise to the challenge of state building and nation building.
De l'État et la consolidation de la nation.
Dialogue for peace in our country and national cohesion is a constitutional duty for every son and daughter of the nation. It's a supreme obligation. I would like us to set our hearts and minds to it so that we do not betray our common destiny.
Notre destin commun.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break, but we have more stories making headlines for you. Here's what you can expect. Lessons from Guinea as it remains vigilant 3 years after being declared Ebola-free. And from flying toilets to recycled waste, a success story from Kenya's informal settlements.
The newly upgraded CGTN website offers optimized coverage of China and international affairs, as well as distinct voices from around the globe. Be the first to know the biggest political news and discover the background to the major decisions. Decode China with a different perspective and get a better understanding of how China sees the world. Go beyond the news with sharp opinions on the events shaping today's world and reveal a China you have never seen before. Listen to entrepreneurs for in-depth analysis of the economy and touch the pulse of new technology via our hands-on videos. Travel back in time with CGTN to learn about China's past and immerse yourself in Chinese culture to discover the stories behind Kung Fu. Get the latest news on Chinese lifestyle, including travel, sports, and nature. Regular productions including Ask China put high-ranking officials on the spot, while C-Lab presents new ways of storytelling via cutting-edge technologies, and Global Stringer delivers unique videos from China and beyond. Take a look at the world from a different angle. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Hello and welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin is warning of consequences from Turkey's ongoing military operation in northern Syria. He says that jailed Islamic State militants could escape, leading to a resurgence of the Islamist group. Meanwhile, European Council President Donald Tusk also raised concerns, worried Ankara's actions could lead to another humanitarian crisis. Tens of thousands of civilians have already fled their homes, fearing for their lives. Michal Bardavid has more from the Turkish-Syrian border.
First of all, it's a very intense situation. Turkey believes this is very necessary to create a secure border area, but also to establish a safe zone inside Syria across the Turkish-Syrian border. So this is something that Turkey thinks is very critical for Turkey's national security. And we just moved a little bit further down. We were yesterday reporting from the exact point of the Turkish-Syrian border. We had to move a little bit further down from that border because there were even rockets reaching from the Syrian side into that town in Akçakale where we were yesterday, and rockets reached that town and killed 3 people. So the situation is very intense on the Turkish side as well. But of course, Turkey is carrying out many attacks on the other side of the border, on Tel Abyad as well as Ras Al. These are Syrian towns that Turkey is targeting at this moment. As of this morning, Turkey's defense ministry has stated that 277 what they call terrorists, the Syrian Kurdish group, the YPG, have been neutralized. When they say neutralized, they are referring to those who have been captured, killed, or who have surrendered to Turkish forces. There have been some statements that have been made by the Turkish foreign minister as well as the NATO Secretary General who's visiting Turkey today. Turkey's foreign minister has emphasized that from their allies, it's not enough for them just to say that they understand Turkey's security concerns. They want to see clear solidarity from allies. Meanwhile, statements from NATO Secretary General, he emphasized that, first of all, they understand Turkey's security concerns, that Turkey is a very powerful NATO ally, but with great power comes great responsibility, he said. He also emphasized that no other NATO ally has suffered more terrorist attacks than Turkey, that no other NATO ally was hosting more refugees than Turkey. So he gave credit for Turkey for the efforts that it's making. But he also warned Turkey to be cautious so that the gains made against ISIS in that region would not be risked. He also expressed concern regarding the operation to not destabilize the area, the region for Turkey.
Minister Çavuşoğlu and I also discussed Turkey's ongoing operation in northern Syria. I shared with him my serious concerns about the ongoing operation and the risk of further destabilizing the region, escalating tensions, and even more human suffering. While Turkey has legitimate security concerns, I expect Turkey to act with restraint.
Meanwhile, Syria says it will not negotiate with Kurdish forces if it undermines the nation's territorial integrity. A top Syrian official blamed the Kurds for the ongoing Turkish offensive in northern Syria, saying the Syrian government will confront all invaders to protect its sovereignty.
We stress again that the Syrian army is fighting the terrorist groups across Syria, and we fight against invading foreign forces that exist illegally on Syrian soil. We are fully ready to confront all challenges facing Syria. The basis for the political process to end the Syrian conflict should follow the United Nations guidelines. That is, It should be led by the Syrian people with respect for national sovereignty, independence, and territorial integration. When Turkey is occupying our lands, how can the Syrian Constitutional Council really function?
Well, Ethiopia says the standoff over the filing of the Grand Renaissance Dam reservoir can be solved through the technical team of the experts from the three countries, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. The country has, however, rejected the notion of having the international community act as a mediator in the talks over Nile waters. Here is CGTN's Daniela Pearson with more on that story.
Ethiopia says that the three countries involved in the construction and functioning of the dam should not lose sight of the agreed cooperation. However, the question now remains on how the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will be filled. Egypt, which relies on the Nile water for about 90% of its supply, recently condemned Ethiopia for trying to move ahead with its own plans on how to divert water from this source. The Egyptian Ministerial Committee on the Water Talks briefed Parliament on Thursday.
We've been very flexible in the talks. We're talking about the timing to fill the reservoir, which in comparison to the effect on us, it's incomparable. Water is a matter of life. We want development and electricity, which is their right, but it cannot mean we become thirsty and destroy our agriculture. So far, we've been following a patient policy. We're still hoping it will get results.
Ethiopia responded by saying that Egypt's conditions for filling the reservoir were unjustified and could make the issue political rather than technical.
The basis of their discussion is the declaration of principles signed among the three countries in 2015. This 2015 agreement is the basis for their consultation, and Ethiopia believes that the DOP has an ample mechanism to address any issues that crop up during the discussion process. For that very reason, the recent talks are technical talks. We have now reached at a point of discussing on how to fill the GERD, and this is an entirely technical issue, and it should only be approached as a technical issue.
The Grand Renaissance Dam acts as one of Africa's largest infrastructure projects. Egypt's concern borders on the possible impact of drought or destruction of agriculture, threatening water supplies. A declaration of principles was signed by Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt in 2015 that have since held on and off talks about its operation. All three countries hope to benefit not just from the water, but the potential production of 6,000 megawatts of electricity. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Well, let's go to Guinea, where CGTN's Wilke Sanyawa met with doctors and survivors of Ebola 3 years after WHO declared Guinea free of the disease. More than 2,500 people died in the country's worst epidemic, and the effects are still being felt. Lessons learned from that outbreak have informed medics in their handling of outbreaks in other countries.
Life in Conakry moves fast as residents race across the streets seeking their fortunes. But just 3 years ago, this city presented a different face. Then, the country with a population of just over 12 million people was battling the deadly hemorrhagic fever, Ebola. Patient Zero was an 18-month-old child who contracted the virus in a remote village in 2013. Dr. Pepe Perivogi was one of the first doctors who were called in to help contain the disease, even as it spread, first to the capital and then to neighboring countries.
Here, Guinea is started by Gekedu, who is a big city and more than 100,000 people. And the capital also, the big city Conakry, and so on. So the outbreak was very, very hard for us to end it.
Over 6,000 people in Guinea contracted the disease. Of these, over 2,500 died. Medics launched an aggressive campaign. First, they strengthened the country's healthcare systems. Then they set about tracing the patients.
Wherever you would have a case, so the community health workers were involved in community-based surveillance, event management and contact tracing. So hundreds of medical students were trained to go and support the intervention on the field.
This approach reduced the number of incidents of Ebola, but to eradicate it, medics gave one last big push.
The vaccine was an innovation that also accelerated the end of the epidemic. This approach was also not completely new because it was used before in the eradication of smallpox, called ring vaccination, because you would identify a person who is ill, all his or her contacts, and vaccinate around that person.
In 2016, Guinea was declared Ebola-free.
Guinea's fight against Ebola is a story of innovation and dedication, and with the knowledge that they have gathered here, medical experts in Guinea are now able to lend their expertise to other countries, helping to ward off an outbreak of the magnitude of the West African Ebola outbreak.
In the face of recent cases of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a team of Guinean medics has been sent to bolster efforts to contain that outbreak. They are now preparing to use a new vaccine. But in Guinea, residents are still cautious and still observe the precautions.
Whenever you go to the hospital, you make sure you wash your hand immediately when you get out from the hospital. If I found out anybody with symptoms with Ebola, the most important thing that I can do, I can just try to call any medical doctor around to come and look after the person.
The virus is gone, but medics are still building capacity. They are determined to ensure that in the event of another outbreak, the virus will find a country prepared to take it down before it can take hold again. Wilkis Anyabwa, CGTN.
Well, human waste is no longer being flung out of the windows in slums around the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Now, more than 100,000 people are using eco-friendly latrines every day. The innovative approach by a company called Synergy uses waterless toilets. The waste collected from these blue and yellow toilets is taken to a facility outside the city and recycled into fertilizer. CGTN's Laura Walobengo has more.
This is Mukuru, a slum in Nairobi. Locals have been working to improve sanitation here since 2012. People would use bags because there were no toilets and they would throw them out the window. Now there is less of these flying toilets thanks to an expanding fleet of eco-friendly lavatories.
It was not nice. We were using the dirty sanitation. It was not good. It had germs. Even we were infected. Even you could not allow your son or daughter to use it because it's very dirty.
Synergy is the enterprise behind the sanitation scheme. It's a solution for slums. They use waterless toilets which don't rely on sewers and are far cheaper to erect among the nooks of Mukuru's dense alleyways. The waste collected from these toilets is taken to a facility outside Nairobi and recycled into fertilizer.
This fertilizer is cheaper than the others and feeds the soil well. The plants grow much faster and, above all, bear a lot of fruit.
It's an innovative approach to a multi-pronged challenge confronting city planners. As people pour into cities, slums rise faster than governments can lay sewage lines, build toilets or develop systems for managing waste. Mukuru has roughly one public latrine for every 547 households and very few are connected to sewers.
With container-based sanitation, which is what our toilet is, you don't need to build a sewer line. Yeah? Now, you can imagine the process that you have to go through to be able to lay a sewer in a place that is that heavily densely populated. It's virtually impossible.
In the dead of the night, sanitation teams safely remove the human waste in sealed barrels and spirit it away using wheelbarrows. Some of the cost is borne by the community under a franchise model. Residents pay about $8.5 a month for the toilet, regular cleaning and waste collection, or landlords cover the cost on their block. Laura Walabengo, CGTN.
While we continue with stories making headlines across Africa, for the latest in business, here is Uche.
Thank you, Hannah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz.
Former President Jacob Zuma to stand trial on corruption charges. And Nigeria seeks to recover $62 billion from oil companies operating in the country.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in South Africa, where former President Jacob Zuma will stand a trial on corruption charges relating to a $2 billion arms deal. Now, this is after a high court denied him a permanent stay of prosecution. The ruling paves the way for Zuma's long-awaited trial to start on October 15th. The case is a rare example of an African leader being held to account for his actions. While Zuma denies any wrongdoing, Zuma, who was in office from 2009 to 2018, had applied for a permanent stay of prosecution on 18 charges of fraud, racketeering, and money laundering relating to a deal to buy European military hardware for South Africa's armed forces in the 1990s. Now, 3 High Court judges have dismissed former President Jacob Zuma's claims that his corruption prosecution was too tainted by political interference to go ahead.
The application brought by Jacob Zuma under case number CCD 30/2018 is dismissed with such costs to include those consequent upon employment of 2 counsels.
I think that it's only fair because justice needs to be served where it's due.
And I think it's a fair thing. The trial should go on. Let's for once just have belief on our justice system.
Now, still in South Africa, struggling power utility firm Eskom says it is challenging the regulator's latest tariff decision in court, a move the firm says is necessary to avert financial disaster. State-owned Eskom, which produces more than 90% of the country's electricity, implemented some of the most severe power cuts in several years this year and is reliant on government bailouts to survive. Back in March, regulator NERSA granted Eskom tariff increases of 9.4%, 8.1% and 5.2% over the next 3 years, far below what the utility had sought. Now, at the time, Eskom said the tariff awards left it without a projected revenue shortfall of around $6.7 billion. And heading to Nigeria now, the country is seeking to recover as much as $62 billion from international oil companies. The government is using regulations that enable it to review revenue-sharing contracts. Nigeria claims that energy companies failed to comply with the 1993 contract law requirement that grants the state a greater share of revenues if crude prices exceed $20 per barrel. However, it is unknown which oil companies are being targeted. Of course, Nigeria is attempting to bolster its revenue following a recession in 2016. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari recently offered a record budget of $33 billion for 2020 in an attempt to spur economic growth. And in Zambia, Finance Minister Bwalia Ngandu says that the country owed major mining companies $215 million in tax refunds as at June 30th, 2019. Now, the news is the latest development in a long-running dispute with the miners. In December, the country withheld payment, saying the correct documentation had not been provided. The government has verified that it owed the companies the $250 million in value-added tax refunds, adding that the mining firms were claiming an additional $376 million without providing any evidence. Ngandu made the statement while responding to a question in Parliament on the unpaid tax refunds to local mining firms, which are majority owned by Glencore, Vedanta Resources, First Quantum Minerals and Barrick Gold. In Egypt, a total of 80 million tons of garbage is collected each year, with most of it ending up in piles on the streets of Cairo. But now one agricultural tech startup in the North African nation is hoping to fix this. Here's CGTN's Adel El Maroui with the story of Baramoda, which is an Egyptian startup that's turning agricultural waste into organic fertilizer.
There is more than 10 million acres of agricultural land in Egypt. Annually, they leave an estimated 38 million tons of waste. For decades, getting rid of that waste has been a burden to the nation, but these young entrepreneurs have seen an opportunity.
I found out in my village that there are huge waste remains that get dumped from sugar factories. They are either thrown away or they get burned. After some research, we found out that they can be processed and turned into fertilizers.
We are trying to solve problems facing Egypt and the world. In 30 years, we're going to be 9 billion people and we need to feed them. So we must increase the area of cultivated land as well as its productivity. Our product basically revives the nutrients in the soil and decreases the water needed for cultivation by 30%.
In their hometown, Qina, they began manually to manufacture their organic compost. At first, they started knocking on doors, going from one small farm to the other, desperate to make their first deal. The very little excitement from the local farmers they saw, together with the belief in their product, made them take a little risk.
It was challenging to market our product in the beginning. Our clients are mainly farmers who are quite poor or small consultants. We tried to inform them that the product is more natural and can replace chemical fertilizers. It was no use, so we offered it without prepayment. And to give more guarantees, we said if you didn't like the results, we wouldn't even take the money later.
When Baramoda began, they aimed to produce 500 tons of their organic fertilizers annually. In few months, they increased that figure 20-folds. By the year 2020, they should operate a new factory that will produce 100,000 tons every year. They say this compost saves 20% of cultivation costs while increasing productivity by 15%. Adel El Maroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Now, if you are familiar with Nigeria, you may have heard of the city of Aba in Abia State in the country's southeastern region. It is one of Nigeria's industrial clusters and the biggest shoe market in the West African sub-region. Now, a new set of shoe manufacturers are competing to put another southeast Nigerian state on the map. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with that story.
Many of the shoes you find in Nigerian boutiques are branded made in Italy or made in China. But fact is, they're most likely made here. Welcome to Nkwele Izunaka Shoemaking Cluster, the home of local shoe manufacturing in Anambra State, southeastern Nigeria. It's the second biggest shoe manufacturing hub in Nigeria's southeast. And as you can imagine, everyone is like a busy machine here, from the old to the young, male and female. Everyone here makes different kinds of shoes, and from here, the shoes find their way to markets across the country and beyond its borders.
The market was established as a cluster for all shoe manufacturers for adults, children, men, women, students, and all paramilitary groups. Anything footwear is manufactured here.
The current unemployment rate in Nigeria stands at 23.1%. And for many youths who couldn't get white-collar jobs, the shoe market represents an entrepreneurial opportunity and financial security. One of them is Chukuma, who is a trainee under one of the shoemakers here.
Some of my mates, not on the street.
There are some of my mates who are roaming the streets, stealing and picking pockets. My joy is that I found myself here in this business. At the completion of my apprenticeship, I will establish my own business to pursue a career in shoemaking.
So, the Anambra State government commissioned the shoe manufacturing market in 2007 and gave us loans of about $1,400 each to about 800 shoe manufacturers in the market under the Anambra Small Business Agency. Ever since, the market has become a major manufacturing center with thousands of shoes produced here daily.
Machines are needed in what we do. Because we do not have machines, we construct all that we produce here manually. we've appealed to government for assistance in mechanizing our production activities here. Mechanization has helped our colleagues in Aba by making their jobs easier and better.
The general preference for foreign products among Nigerians is mainly the reason why some of their shoes here are branded as foreign. It's something the Nigerian government is working hard to change with its Made in Nigeria campaign. But the shoemakers here say they can compete with foreign brands if they had more government support and access to machines.
There's a promise by government that machines would be supplied for our operations. If this can be achieved, our finishing would be improved upon. There is a great difference between a manually produced product and the one that is mechanically produced.
But machines are not the only challenge confronting the shoemakers. They say the lack of electricity affects their cost of production, making their shoes more expensive and harder for them to compete with cheaper imported brands. They want the government to fully support small and medium enterprises so that they in turn could create jobs and help the economy to grow. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Nkwele Zunaka, Anambra State, Nigeria.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed wins the 100th Nobel Peace Prize. We'll be taking a look at how this reflects on his economic reforms. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you.
We'll see you a little bit later, Uche. Thank you so much for that. For now, we're going to take a short break. But more news, here's what you can expect. Tanzanian artist hopes for greater success after beating 60 competitors to win the Oscar of African Creativity.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, Tanzanian artist Lutengano Mwakisopele has new hopes for success after winning the first place in the painting category of this year's Oscar of African Creativity contest. The contest, organized by the Egyptian Foreign Ministry, seeks to develop and discover African artistic talent. Lutengano competed against 60 other artists from 20 African countries for top honors in his category. CGTN's Isaac Lukando caught up with him in Dar es Salaam.
Lutengano may be the most creative painter on the African continent. Winning this year's Oscar of African Creativity Award in the painting category might be proof of this. A painting depicting challenges of freedom of speech in Africa won him the award. And he believes his success is a result of his passion for painting.
I feel very happy when I paint. I'm happy even if I don't get to sell my pictures. I only sell because I need to make a living.
The Tanzanian artist, who started painting in 1992, incorporates mixed media in his art, and he attributes part of his success to years spent at Nafasi Art Space, a platform for artistic exchange in Dar es Salaam.
Platforms like Nafasi Art Space play a crucial role in getting artists like Lutengano noticed, helping them grow professionally and offering them hope of making a living from their art.
Visual and performing artists at this center come to create, learn, inspire, exhibit and perform, and possibly earn an income.
Member artists do have access to workshops that will allow them to market themselves and professionalize their practice and do all the things that are required on an international contemporary art basis to bring your artistic practice to a level where you do have regular sales.
Having won an award in the Absa L'Atelier art competition, visual artist Winifred Luena agrees that it takes much more than being creative to succeed.
Success for an artist doesn't just come because you create works of art. It depends on where you will take your work in order to sell and whether the public understands you because they can connect with your work.
Lutengano believes that winning the award will not only motivate him to work harder, but will also earn him a better living.
Winning this award will help me increase the amount I charge for my art. My price will definitely go high.
With every stroke of his brush, Lutengano and other Tanzanian artists like him hope to paint a more successful future for themselves. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, still to come, the latest in sports news, including world record holder Eliud Kipchoge's Ineos 159 Challenge sub-2-hour marathon is a combined effort of determination and teamwork.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born.